wicked mystery. A paranormal perfect storm known simply as Monsterland. The Monsterland Podcast is recorded live in an undisclosed location somewhere in the heart of high strangeness, just outside of Monsterland, Massachusetts. And now, here are your hosts, paranormal author, researcher, and speaker, Ronnie LeBlanc, and the host of The Curse of Oak Island, drilling down on history, Matty Blake.
Bigfoots and mummies and jinn. Oh my! Our guest tonight will be David Weatherly, author of the book Strange Intruders, also Wood Knock, 3-part series. This guy is unbelievable. It's an unbelievable interview, Ronnie. I make an admission, a story I went through that I don't talk about.
You've kept it close to your chest for a while.
Really at all, that you've known since pretty much the day we met.
Yeah.
And boy, it goes in a direction that I did not expect this interview to go. I'll warn you, if you are squeamish about these type of spiritual matters, you might not want to listen to this interview. If you feel like you could be spiritually attacked or something like that, this interview gets pretty wild, but pretty awesome. Ronnie, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. How are you, Matty?
Fantastic. Energized. Back here, we had an experience, you and I.
Yeah.
Should we just get into it? Because I teased it on an
let's
yeah? All right.
Let's do it.
So, first of all, I listen back to these things. I keep going, first of all, hold on. By the way, I interrupt myself with new thoughts. My mind is very, okay.
There's a lot going on.
I want to thank Michael Devon.
Yes.
From the band Whitesnake. Many of you might love and remember Whitesnake. They are still touring, still rocking. We just saw them
last night.
Last night. God, it was last night. Oh, my God. Rocking Boston. David Coverdale still killing it. And Michael is the bassist and vocalist with David Coverdale.
Yeah. Leominster native.
From Monsterland.
Yes.
So that song you hear, which people have asked us about, this Monsterland theme song that we come in and out of and plays in between the interview and all that, is an original by Michael Devon from Whitesnake.
Yeah.
And the record is From the Earth, available now on iTunes, Amazon, everywhere you can get your music, right?
You know what's neat? It was recorded at David Grohl's studio.
That's unbelievable.
And I think on the same board that they did Nirvana's Nevermind.
Yes, because Dave Grohl, if you watch that documentary, Sound City, he took a lot of that equipment out of that famous Nirvana studio and brought it to his home studio. So that when you hear Monsterland, some of that was recorded right there in the Foo Fighters studio. So
how appropriate is that?
Pretty cool, man. I know, I didn't even think about that till right now, until you just said that.
Orange Rose, baby.
Holy moly. And last week, we actually mentioned Foo Fighters.
Yes.
Dr. Lynn mentioned Foo Fighters.
Right,
and we didn't know at the time. Holy shit.
We're going to have a lot of this popping.
Oh, my God. Well, let's talk about that. So I've never had a UFO experience. I've wanted one. And let me just say this. If you listen to this podcast, Ronnie, my partner, has the magic touch. You have the juju. You have the orbs following you. You've had orbs, when you've asked them on command, taken pictures of them.
Yeah. You've
had a Bigfoot sighting, all that. So I've been looking up into the skies for years. And here is our UFO story. We did an interview for another podcast on Father's Day Eve, Saturday night. Now, this particular podcast, what was it called? I'm sorry.
Spaced Out Saturday.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Spaced Out Saturday. It's down south, I think.
Yep.
Syndicated on a couple radio stations down the American South East.
New Orleans, and there's Cali, some of Canada as well.
I think Atlanta, maybe.
Yep.
So we were guests on this podcast / radio show, this paranormal podcast / radio show. The host, Joe
Rupe. Yep.
Did a great job. But his time, it runs 9 to midnight. Right? Our time, it was midnight to 3 a.m. So we knew it was going to be a late night. So Ronnie came over to my house. We got some dinner, had a couple IPAs, and just did the thing. 3 hours. It was awesome. And at the end of that 3 hours, Ronnie said, you know what, I'm just going to drive home because, it's 3 in the morning. And what am I going to sleep at your house till 6?
Father's Day. And the next.
It's Father's Day. It was actually bled into Father's Day because it's Sunday morning at 3 a.m., which I don't like, by the way, because we know the significance of 3 a.m. And if you don't, we'll get into that in further episode. But we walked outside, and it just had that. It had that 3 a.m. vibe.
It did, didn't it?
And there was kind of an energy. There's always an energy between you and I about
Right.
when we get together on this stuff. And we've had, as we've mentioned on this podcast before, synchronicities and things happen to us already. So when we walked outside, I immediately said to Ronnie, let's go. Come on, you got the magic. Let's see something. I got to see my UFO. Do your thing. As I said, do your thing. So we look up in the sky, and what do you think it was, Ronnie?
A minute,
Maybe two?
maybe two.
And first, I'll tell you what we saw, just the basics, without adding any adjectives or anything like that. Just I'll tell you what we saw. We saw some sort of star-looking thing go very quickly across the whole entire sky. And by the way, we're in Rhode Island where I live. Huge sky, tons of stars. We're right on the banks of what's called the Palmer River, which flows into Narragansett Bay. An expansive sky. So
Very little light pollution.
very little.
Yeah.
It was a great look at the starry sky. And this thing was moving faster than any satellite I've ever seen, but it was the size of a satellite, size of a star. And it comes across the sky like this, and we both kind of saw it at the same time. And we tracked it. It disappeared for a minute right above us at like 12 o'clock and it came back into view again, to my view. And we both kind of started talking as we were watching it, like, well, couldn't be a satellite. It's moving awful fast. Couldn't be this. It ain't a star. It's moving.
Right.
It ain't a plane. It ain't this. It ain't that. And then I started saying, literally out loud, right? I said, come on, show us, baby, show us. And as I said that, it started changing color. It got really bright red. It started kind of emitting like you could see the offshoots of the red light.
And I said, flash or do something to power up or something. And we're speaking out loud to this thing.
And then you saw a white flash.
As soon as this thing, you were looking at it almost like a Tiger Woods.
So
right?
I did the Tiger Woods thing like this, going, show me, baby. And it started getting brighter. And I was like, holy shit.
You start seeing it almost changing color. Like it's turning red, Ronnie.
It's like doing what I'm saying. It's doing what I'm saying.
And as it goes, and I'm watching, and all of a sudden there was a flash in the sky after I said, flashed something. And it was like somebody turned a flashlight on and went, choo, choo, but it was like pointed right at us. I lost my breath when it happened because it was like in response to what we're trying to get it to do.
As it was for me too. And I said, show us. So I did not see the flash.
Right. Because
I was cupping like this, or maybe I wasn't meant to see it. I don't know. But now I'll talk about why I think it's so significant, because really you could tell me I didn't see a disc. I didn't see a hovering object. I didn't see a orb. I saw what
it looked like a
satellite,
a white star, like a star-like object that was moving across. It wasn't blinking. It was solid. It was silent, and it was moving way faster than like a satellite.
It looked like a satellite that I've seen a million times. You see what you think is a star, and it's a satellite kind of moving at that pace. If you're watching us on YouTube now, it's moving at this pace. This was moving at this pace, and it turned red, but it didn't leave a trail. So I don't think it was a meteor or anything like that. It was small. So truly, I don't know what I saw. But here's what's weird about it, is that you and I, here's the metaphysical aspect, and this is why I think I might have seen something. You and I both saw it at the same time, which sounds simple, but it's not, because we had this expansive sky, and for whatever reason,
we're both looking in the exact same spot.
We both looked and went, and you said,
"Here we go,
here we go," and Ian, when he said, "Here we go," I was already seeing it. So that's kind of weird. Like with the whole sky, we both cued in on this freaking dot. It was the size of a star.
And okay, the other thing is when you start talking to these things, right? Like, I mean, you said, "Come on, do your magic, make it come in." I'm like,
"Show us, baby. Show us,
baby." I don't know if it's what's going to happen here, but here we go. Here comes one moving, and the fact that you saw it changing color and it responded, and that flash was like, I felt almost like my pupils, like, it was.
I heard you go,
unbelievable.
Yeah, so, and it's funny with these things, man. I'm like still.
I still, when that happened, I still am in doubt what just happened. Because your brain is just trying to rationalize.
Ronnie, put it this way. How long have I been begging for a UFO and Sasquatch experience?
Years.
Right?
Years.
I had one for all intents and purposes, and I didn't even mention it to Colleen and Max, my son and wife, till like Father's Day night at like 9 o'clock. Oh, by the way, I think I saw a UFO last night. And
Same thing.
You did?
With me, like I had forgotten about it.
Well, it's like, for me, it's just like so exhausting to try to, like, oh, you just started doing a podcast.
Right.
And you think you saw some. It's 3 a.m. I can just hear people already.
Now, here's the other thing. If you rewind to what we were talking about on that podcast, which they were talking about us coming onto the scene, and Joe had watched this and he wanted to have us on, and we're sharing our stories. We're trying to get this thing moving here, and I don't know. The whole thing was just wild.
We actually mentioned star UFOs too.
We mentioned that people will see these UFOs that will act like stars. They'll be sitting in a position, and then you're kind of, whether you're projecting whatever, you start seeing them move, and they start zigzagging around to get your attention, or they just start taking off. And I felt like this, what we're watching, it flew by another one that was sitting in the sky, and that's what flashed at us. As it went by this point, as it passed, the flash came like from a star, but it was so bright, like it was like 100 times the
See,
it was wild.
How did I not see that? Me cupping my eyes is not of enough. I think you were supposed to see that. I really do. I think you were supposed to see that, because if it was that intense, me cupping my eyes, I still would have seen, you would think.
Right.
Dude, this is just... See, now this goes back to what we said before, too, on this very podcast. Be careful what you wish for. You might get it, because...
Yeah.
As I was saying, show us, and it started changing colors, I started freaking.
That's what happens, because
my
it's
heart
just
stopped in my chest.
Because you kind of know deep down that there is a reason it's responding to you in a way. You know, they can pick up on certain people that have, it's like radio waves, right? You're just turning into a different signal.
It's just like that story I told about my bird. You know, when I was a kid, I still remember that fear. And when I saw that full body apparition, I'm like, nope, don't want it. And yet I yearn for it.
Right.
I yearn for it. And when it happens, and even in my faith life, there was one night, and we get into this in the interview, about my return to my faith in my 30s and the faith of my youth. And all these wonderful things were happening. And then something very bad happened, which I'm going to talk to David, our guest, about in just a couple minutes. But one of the good things that happened was I was lying in my bed one night during this kind of slow reconversion, and I started praying, and I had my eyes closed, and I was just like, okay, you know, it's all talk, it's all prayer, it's all thought. I go, but they say you can really do stuff to me. Like, they say you can change my heart. Or, you know what I'm like, this prayer just opening up. And Ronnie, I felt like you feel when you get shot with morphine. That's what it felt like. I felt a warmth going, and I had tears streaming down my eyes. And I didn't get blissful. I got scared.
Like, what's
causing this? And I was like, no, I don't want you and me. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so.
Well, I mean, even the idea of God can be scary.
God, so
right? I mean, not just aliens, but the fact that there's someone, you know, an entity that's kind of controlling that concept.
There's the born agains have this thing where they say, like, I forget the exact phraseology, but it's like, you know, do you mean to tell me that the creator of all heaven and earth knows me? That's frightening.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Would be in me and affecting me. Like, that's frightening.
Yeah.
So the whole thing. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, I'm still hesitant to say I saw a UFO, but
you saw a UFO, brother.
By definition, I saw an object I cannot accurately identify.
Right. Doesn't mean it's from space.
And
you know,
and an object that, on command, responded to what I said. Now, it might be a coincidence. It might have been a meteor that was going to flame out red or whatever anyway, and it just happened to do it right when I said, show me something, which is... Ronnie's not buying it.
No. Welcome to the club.
Whew. Well, thank you then. And now I'm hesitant to go into the woods with you again, because I'm going to see a Bigfoot.
Yeah,
I'm going to flip out again.
That's going to happen.
All right, let's move on from that. There was tons of UFO stuff. We have Space Force.
Can you believe that came out?
What has Donald Trump learned in the last few months, you think?
Oh, man. We were just talking about a couple months, there'll be another announcement, something, and then a Space Force. So, yeah, something's up, right? I mean, he got some intel on something here, but...
Well, you get, again, not to go through it again, we've gone through it every podcast, but Tic Tac UFO, government starting to disclose, and also our president is saying, you know what? Space is a fighting frontier, like the earth, like the ocean. So it's like fighting frontier.
Right.
Where'd that come from? Right?
Yeah.
Now, Area 51, this kind of online thing put together, I thought this is interesting. They did UFOs and presidents, the top 5 encounters. Oh. So they have the Harry S. Truman thing, and if you're not familiar with that, look that up. Dwight D. Eisenhower supposedly made a treaty with aliens. You can look that up too.
Is Reagan in the top 5?
Let's see, JFK. Remember that memo where JFK was saying basically that the UFOs could trigger a war with Russia? Like it came from the JFK administration saying like, hey, get that intern out of the pool. We're going to get caught. And also find out what UFOs are, because they thought UFOs would be mistaken for one of our craft and Russia would start firing at us. So it's almost another government admission, like taking UFOs seriously. Then the Richard Nixon, Jackie Gleason incident. Have we talked about that?
I feel like we did.
On this podcast, Ian? We did?
Yeah.
Real quick, Jackie Gleason swore his entire life that he was, into aliens, UFOs. He believed, he was a believer, and he became friends with President Nixon and hounded Nixon for a very long time. Tell me. And according to Gleason, he swore to it till his dying day. Nixon one night took him to, I don't know if it was specifically Area 51, but a base.
I think it might have been Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio.
Nixon drove Gleason to, this says Homestead.
Okay.
In Florida.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yes, that's right.
Okay.
That's Florida. Yeah.
Here it is, right here. Why am I going off my memory? I can read it. They entered a heavily guarded building, and Nixon guided them to an inner chamber. There, Gleason was aghast. He was looking at what appeared at first to be mangled children. His words. On closer inspection, he realized that they weren't children. They were not human. Gleason told confidants that he felt very upset that the government hid such monumental secrets from the public. And then Jimmy Carter, his sighting. No, but Reagan isn't in this particular list. But I was thinking, too, go back to right here in New England. We had a large sighting right on the Charles River way back in the day.
James Winthrop.
Yeah. They see a UFO right in the Charles River. And then our first president, George Washington, claims in his journals, you can go look this up, that he saw some sort of orb and actually talked to beings that came from the orb. That's George Washington.
Freemason, too, by the way.
Bingo. So something's up. You tell us. We also have some new sound, and this is a local. This has a local. Again, Monsterland is recorded on the outskirts of Monsterland in Massachusetts here. Audio of pilot's encounter with a strange object over New York surfaces. But however, this has a local tie to us, Ronnie, because this is a Piper PA 32R Saratoga. And I know Ian, our director,
small plane, right,
knows
Ian?
his planes.
Yeah.
This was flying over Huntington, Long Island, but it was a trip between Minuteman Airfield in Massachusetts, probably, 10 minutes from here? Minuteman, maybe? And Old Bridge Airport in New Jersey. So it took off from right down the street here and was flying over New York. And here is, and by the way, the FAA has confirmed this. It's an FAA tape. So let's listen to this audio. This is between the pilot and the tower.
29 approach is 161 Mike Alpha. I'm having an object in front of me. I don't know what it is.
You mean like a drone or something?
Don't know if it's a drone, but it's bigger than a drone.
All right, well, Mike Alpha, I don't show anything on radar. Looks like it's at your altitude.
Affirmative.
Do you need to turn or do anything?
I need to make a slight left turn.
That's fine, sir. And then I guess whenever you can, just let me know what you think it is.
Will do.
I'm ready to make a slight left turn. I love that. He's just trying to be calm, but he's like, you can hear in his voice, these pilots are trained to be calm and under pressure. And Ian brought up during the Tic-Tac-Toe UFO that these trained fighter pilots were laughing. And Ian was saying, these guys don't do fear.
Right.
I mean, they might be scared inside internally, but they don't do fear. So the laughter is like a way, like, look at this,
like
man.
gallows humor.
Right.
Kind of, yeah. And
And this guy's trying to stay calm to the tower, and you can just hear those little hesitations, like, is it a drone? Bigger than a drone. Do you need to evade at all? I'm going to make a left turn, I think. You know what I mean? Like you're going to hear. It's just stunning. So, that's all. That was a local story I just wanted to address. This stuff just keeps coming. It keeps coming and keeps coming. And by the way, it used to be so hard to get audio like this.
Yeah, we're finding it very freely now, aren't we?
Yeah, man. The FAA totally confirmed this. Yep, totally happened. This is our tape. This is our radar. Didn't pick anything up on radar. It was pretty big and flying at his altitude. It's just like,
well, we couldn't have started this podcast at a better time.
Yeah, you can always tell. You can always tell something's up with the delay. You know what I mean? Like when you ask someone a question, like you don't want, if you're trying to convey confidence in something, like you don't want a delay. Like ask me, like pretend you're my wife, right? And ask me, say, do you love me, honey? Ready?
Do you really?
Tell me how you think this goes over, right? Okay.
Do you really love me, honey?
Yeah. Uh-huh. You just gotta say yes. All right. Without any further ado, let's get to our guest, the great David Weatherly. David Weatherly, thank you for venturing into Monsterland.
Oh, thanks for having me on, guys.
Well, we're psyched. I just read Strange Intruders. Ronnie gave me Wood Knocks, which I'm working my way through. It's just a phenomenal work. And we've got so many questions for you, so let's just dive right into it.
Sure, let's go.
So the first
Well, let's start with this. Are you enjoying the books?
Oh my God. Yeah.
Awesome.
I mean,
awesome.
You know,
okay.
I know in the
then we can go forward.
Yeah, that's right. This could have gone real bad real fast. Come to think of it. You mentioned John Keel in the intro of Strange Intruders, and it's like, it reminded me of a John Keel book. And I know he was a huge influence on you, right?
Yeah, he was. Of course, I found his material early on. I started this stuff in the 1970s. And once I got beyond finding just the basic, stuff on newsstands and discovered Fate magazine, and of course he wrote for that, and then really started getting to some of the material that he wrote. Oh yeah, my gosh, a huge influence. John Keel, Jacques Vallée, on the ghost side, people like Hans Holzer and all those early guys. All those early influences on me, those guys were just, they put out phenomenal work. And Keel, I was able to meet on a number of occasions, quite a few times, and speak with him. And it was interesting. He you read Strange Intruders, so, he's sort of pointing me in a direction, when I was looking at this Grinning Man situation that I'd had. And Keel, I think he's one of those guys that he gets a lot of respect now, but he still doesn't get enough, I think.
Agreed.
And his viewpoint was always very holistic, which is something I've always had. And people are only just now starting to cycle back around to that. And when I say holistic, I mean that, he was a big believer in looking at sort of all the phenomena across the board and questioning, is there connected, are there connected strands here? What's the relationship between these things? And a lot of people mistake that for him saying, oh, he's trying to say, flying saucers are dropping off Bigfoot or something like that. But that's not what it's about at all.
Right. And David, real quick, if you could, because I'm realizing as you're talking, we do have a portion of our audience who have come to us through all kinds of different relationships, and they're kind of new to the paranormal thing. Could you just explain who Keel was and the whole, the high strangeness related to how he was writing? And
Oh, sure. Yeah. John Keel, he's most well known for the Mothman Prophecies. So if you've ever seen the movie, which is in itself a classic, the Mothman Prophecies with Richard Gere, about the events that led up to the tragic collapse of the Silver Bridge in Point Pleasant, which oddly enough, I was just there a couple of days ago.
Oh, wow.
And so, another synchronicity, I guess.
Yeah.
But Keel, he took a very journalistic approach to looking at topics like UFOs, Fortean phenomena, such as the things that Charles Fort wrote about, strange rains of frogs, or, chunks of ice, fish, all these types of things. Monster sightings, whether it was Bigfoot or lake monsters, all this wide range of things. So Keel researched all of this material, started writing about it primarily initially in articles, and wrote for a whole range of popular magazines in the 1970s, magazines like Argosy and Saga. And then he went on to start looking into the events that were happening in Point Pleasant, West Virginia in the late 1960s, where people were reporting this Mothman. And he wrote a book called The Mothman Prophecies, is what they based the movie off of. But I always tell everybody, you know, if you're only going to read a couple of books in this field, you have to read the Mothman Prophecies.
It's a must read.
100%. It's my first.
Yeah, it's you know, the in some ways the movie doesn't do it justice at all, because that's only a tiny portion of what occurs, and it's, of course, it's a dramatized version. There's so much more in the book, The Mothman Prophecies, and you know, just phenomenal things. And of course, as Keel delved into all of these things, he had a lot of very bizarre experiences himself, which he consistently wrote about as they were occurring. So, you know, he was really kind of tapped into the pulse of the period in terms of, again, going back to the 1970s. Now, we were not far away from Project Blue Book having been closed, and the Air Force, quote, solving the UFO puzzle. You know, the contactee movement was still in full swing, and you know, all these people claiming countless encounters with aliens who were here for various reasons. And of course, you know, all the events involving the Mothman and other creature sightings around the country. So again, Keel is just phenomenal. It's really nice that now all of his material pretty much is available. It's been collected in a number of volumes, and for those who are really interested, you can read his full catalog of work at this point. So he's certainly one of the people that I always recommend. You know, you got to read this guy.
Yeah, he's unbelievable. David, talk to me a little bit about, you know, you've written these books, Wood Knocks, already at the volume 3, and it's great reads, because it's taking research from all these other Sasquatch researchers across the country and really the world, and kind of diving into this mystery a little bit deeper. What have you kind of come up to the conclusion to now with all of your research? Are you leaning, is this an animal? Is this something else? Where do you kind of stand at this point in time?
Oh, let's open the can of worms.
That's what we do best.
Get right to it.
Right at the start. So, you know, this is, first of all, again, I'll clarify for your listeners.
Yeah.
So this really is sort of a can of worms, because within the field of cryptozoology, Bigfoot studies in particular, there's a real division. You have a large portion of people who are scientific cryptozoologists who are actually absolutely convinced this is simply an undiscovered ape that has been in small numbers surviving in the wilderness in the United States and other places around the world. On the other side, you almost can't get any more polar opposite than this. You have people that are, I have to carefully think of the right words. So you have people who profess that they are in regular contact with these creatures. Some say they are in psychic communion with them, that these creatures are telepathic, that they are highly evolved. You know, some people, some of these believers think that there's some kind of, you know, very evolved species that's even, you know, evolved beyond humans. And they have a whole process that they go through to communicate with these creatures. And some of them even claim they receive spiritual lessons from the furry ones, or the hairy creatures, or, you know, the Sasquatch, essentially. So, you know, because of my background and the way I've always approached this phenomena, I fall in a region that is kind of unique in a sense. I have a lot of connections to various Native Americans and tribal studies from around the world. Awesome. So, you know, I early on went to Native elders and talked to them about these creatures. And over time, you know, what I've come to believe is that, yes, we are dealing with a physical creature. However, I believe that this creature has abilities that the common person would consider to be paranormal or supernatural.
Yeah.
And, that statement alone always gets a lot of people worked up. You're saying they're spacemen or whatever. No. But what you have to understand is that I think that these creatures have some sophisticated biological aspects that we just haven't discovered yet and we've never encountered. That alone makes them paranormal. And I use that term traditionally in that, it's beyond the normal. A lot of people think paranormal just means ghost hunting. No. Go back old school like me, paranormal is this whole field, UFOs, Bigfoot, all of it. It means beyond the normal, beyond the norm. And when you look at a lot of these encounters with these creatures, there are things that we just can't explain in traditional terms. There's so many sightings where these creatures are there one moment and gone the next.
Right.
There's, the big question of track finds that seemingly just stop and vanish. And a lot of these things, there may be ways to explain this that we just don't understand yet. I often use the analogy. I say, think about the first person who ever saw a chameleon. He's looking at a lizard. Maybe it's laying on a tree or something. And all of a sudden the thing's gone. So, to him, to that early guy, that was probably, something of the gods. That was probably something supernatural.
Magic,
my God, this thing just vanished. Did it teleport? Did it, what did it do? So we may be looking at a physical creature with some kind of sophisticated camouflaging ability. We may be looking at a creature that has an ability akin to infrasound that interferes not just with the human nervous system, but also with the human mind. Because I tell you, there's been interesting accounts from hunters who have, had one of these things in their scope, and they say they just couldn't fire. Sometimes they'll say their brain just kind of froze up.
Right.
Some people will say, well, it looked too human. I didn't want to fire on it. But other people will say, I don't know what happened. I had it in my scope, and one minute it was there, and the next minute I felt weird and it was gone. So, those are some of the things I put out there in terms of these creatures and how I approach it.
And yeah, we've talked on this podcast about people we've talked to who became, physically ill from being near what they believe to be a Bigfoot. And
sure.
And we were talking about animals that have that ability to put out whatever a disabling, like tigers can disable. So you're right, Dave. That's a great point. I wanted to ask you too about, to me, the most terrifying, and I know you're kind of known for this, the black-eyed children phenomenon.
Oh, yeah.
Could you just explain briefly what they are?
Sure. This phenomena, it really, there's not a solid explanation yet for what they are. In basic terms, these encounters encompass incidents where these kids show up at people's homes. They approach cars in parking lots, hotel rooms. There's a wide range of locations that they turn up. On average, there are between 1 and 3 of these kids. They are usually described as being in the range of between 10 and 13 years old. They have very pale skin, and they have solid black eyes. You have to let that idea sink in.
No, we don't.
For a moment.
No, we don't.
And he's like,
just not think about it.
No.
If you haven't seen the depictions of these things, it's a subtle kind of creepy. And what happens in these encounters is that these kids will show up and they will make very strange requests. They'll knock on someone's door and they'll say, we want to come in and get a drink of water. And, this is a child that the adult has never seen in their lives. There's no connection to the neighborhood or anything else. And as the encounter unfolds, and I should point out here that almost universally, when these encounters begin, there's not eye contact made. So typically this child will show up. They'll be looking sort of down at the ground or at their shoes or something. And they'll start making these odd requests. At some point, they'll look up and they'll make eye contact. And that sort of takes things over the edge for the the victim. I believe these people they're not witnesses, they're victims, because they really do suffer a lot of trauma from experiencing these kids. The best known encounter is from 1997. It involved a gentleman named Brian Bethel. And Bethel, a journalist in Amarillo, Texas, went out one night to drop off a check in an after-hours payment box. He was sitting in his car in the strip center writing out a check, and these two kids approached his vehicle. Now, he wasn't in a bad neighborhood. He didn't, they weren't holding a weapon or anything like that. But initially, he just felt uneasy. So he only put the window down a little bit, enough to hear the lead child, who said, "Hey, mister, we need a ride." And as the conversation unfolded, this kid is saying things like, we need to see our mother.
Oh,
we need money for the movie. Bethel, he's growing a bit more nervous, but he still has the mindset to glance over at the movie marquee. He realizes that the movie the kids want to see is more than half over. So this is not adding up. He clearly is reluctant to let the kids in. They're pressing more, and the kid says, "Just let us in the car. We're just a couple of kids." And as this continues to unfold, Brian looks closer at the child, makes eye contact, sees these solid black eyes. Now, this is, there's no whites, there's no color in the pupil, just the entire sclera is black, much like the depictions of the alien grays that we're all used to seeing, since communion and and depictions like that. So this was enough to push him over the edge. And he, he sort of had your reaction, kind of, nope, but he threw the car in gear. He backed out, and as he's turning the car to leave, he glances over in the parking lot, and he finds that these kids have vanished. There's nowhere for them to hide, nowhere that they could have run to quickly. They've just disappeared. Now, the hallmarks of this encounter, these traits continued to show up over countless other encounters through the years. Bethel ended up posting his account online, and he just had a flood of responses. He was so inundated with questions and people contacting him about this that he sort of pulled back and disappeared from the whole thing for a while. He didn't want anything to do with it. He needed to go away, so to speak. And it's interesting because when I wrote the first edition of the book, it came out in 2012, and I had researched it obviously for a couple of years prior to that. I wasn't able to reach Brian Bethel. I sent him several messages, and he wouldn't respond to anything. So it was only after the book had come out and had been out for a little while that he finally started surfacing, and he got in touch with me. And he's had nothing but good to say about the book. And in fact, in 2017, the very end of last year, I did a revised edition of that book, and it has an additional chapter called Brian Bethel 20 Years Later. It's him reflecting on the encounter and all the things that happened to him as a result of encountering these kids. And that chapter alone, I think is worth, is worth the price of the book, just because it's gold. You're hearing it straight from this guy who had this weird, iconic encounter at this point. And I do always like to point out to people that even though that sort of set off the modern wave, these accounts do go much further back in history. A lot of people incorrectly believe this is an urban legend, that it's very modern, and that there aren't any encounters prior to Bethel's, but there are.
Okay, David, we're kind of freaking out here because, all right.
Oh, you need another creepy story?
No,
we got one.
I got one for you. So,
okay.
And Ronnie's my witness because this just happened and it's on camera, our reaction when you mentioned movie theater. So I didn't know the specifics of that story. I forgot. But Ronnie has known the story about me since we've met. It's one of the first things I told him. It's something I don't talk about a lot for fear of ridicule. But very quickly, I'll tell you my encounter, and you can tell me if you think it was a black-eyed children incident or maybe jinn or tricksters or demons or whatever. But when I was in New York City, for 15 years doing the full-time actor thing, and my days consisted of, auditions or shoots or recordings and then pounding the pavement to the next one. And so I went to the movies a lot. And during this particular time, I was having a reconversion back into my Christian faith. I left the church for years. and I was getting back into it, and all these kind of mystical things were happening to me, all these synchronicities, these beautiful things. They were all beautiful. They're all lovely. They're all wonderful. And around this time, I went to a film alone, which I did on average once a week minimum, sometimes 3 times a week. So I would have these gaps in between sessions, appointments. And this particular day, I went to go see The Exorcism of Emily Rose, and I walked into the theater, I was alone in the theater, and behind me at some point, 3, I called them teenagers when I told the story, but I don't know how old they were, came in the theater, or at least I became aware of them. To be honest, I don't remember them coming in. I don't remember the light of the door opening. I just remember hearing the tittering of teens. And then I started to go, are they throwing stuff at me right now? Because I started to get the ting, ting, ting of things like getting thrown, like, jujubes or whatever they were, M&Ms, and then one just directly hit me. I go, all right, that's it. And I stood up and I saw their outlines. I saw 3 kids in the way back, in the middle, where I was in the middle front. They were in the middle back. And I start walking back all angry. And they were loud too. I don't remember what they were saying, but they were loud, tittering, laughing and tittering. And, I left the theater because I go, I'm not going to confront these kids because they're probably kids and I'm an adult. I'm just going to go get a manager. And of course, cliche, I get the employee and we walk back in and they're gone. Nobody's there. So I go, all right, they left. They knew I was going to get the manager, whatever. Watched the rest of the movie, got on the subway, went to get my cell phone out of my bag, and it's gone. It's missing. My cell phone was gone. And it was in the bag. I didn't take it out. It was in there. I shut it off when the movie started because I would do that. And it's just gone. And in the next day or two, people in my life started getting these vile voicemail messages. Think Linda Blair in The Exorcist, your mother's a C, blah, blah, blah. And almost everybody that got them was either very religious or just, Catholic or otherwise Christian. And I kind of did that math as it was happening. And I was overwhelmed with the feeling that I had been visited by demons or tricksters or jinn. I never saw their eyes, so I can't say it was black-eyed children. What do you think when you hear that story? And it's funny, you mentioned movie theater and telling that account and running out of each other. Oh, my God.
Oh, my.
It certainly, this is one of the things about this phenomenon. The book that I wrote, I really made an effort to not voice my personal opinion about what these things were, but to promote, to put the evidence out there and say, this is why these things could be demons. This is why they could be jinn, all those different things. Because the weird thing about this phenomena is when you look at it, it has things in common with so many other areas of the strange. Right. I mean, they share traits in common with the Men in Black, aliens, demonic entities, and so forth. Now, it's pretty fascinating to me that, one, you were in there to see
that movie in particular.
Exactly. A classic film about, demonology.
And I hesitate to tell the story because I feel like that alone makes it sound like I'm, being disingenuous. I was seeing that movie, but I was. and
you get the 2 or 3 kids. They're throwing stuff at you. You can't see what. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, and
is there any record of them taking? Can they take a physical object like that? Like, is there any record in the story?
Well,
shit,
son of a bitch.
You want a long story that kind of wraps in a bunch of the stuff we've been talking about?
Please,
yes.
Okay, so not long after the book came out, I started getting messages from this woman, and she said, her question to me was, she said, how much can these black-eyed kids interfere with electronics? And I sort of had this back and forth exchange with her, and she told me that she got the book. She was really interested in the topic. And I've heard things like this, incidentally, from more than one person. So she got the book. She was interested in the topic. She started reading it, and the first time she starts reading it, she hears this noise in her home. She doesn't know what it is. She locates it. It turns out to be the clock, the timer on her oven. Now, this freaked her out because she'd never used it in her life. She never used a timer for anything. All of a sudden, it's going off. So a couple of these incidents happen like this with things going off. It culminates in her garage door opening itself one day when she's reading the book. And, you know, she's got the fobs. There's no other controls. She's really flipped out. She said, I'm really interested in this topic, but I don't want any visitation, so I'm leaving this alone. And the phenomena stopped. Now, things got even stranger, as several people reported these things to me. But the real start to this crazy story began one day when I got a call on my cell phone. It's from a friend of mine who's in Kentucky. And I answered the phone, nothing there. You know, it's just dead air. I think, oh, he pocket dialed me or something. Well, this begins to happen over and over and over again. And it has weird, you know, it's just, it'll go, I'll let it go to voicemail and it'll leave long messages, but there's nothing there. I shoot him a message and I say, look, man, you keep pocket dialing me, you know, and he apologizes. Right. And then, you know, it happens a few more times, and I pick it up one day and there's a message on there. It's really long. I play the message and I hear a kid laughing. Now, I regret to this day that I didn't somehow save that message. The problem is that he had a young child, and, you know, taking the logical approach, I hear this message, you know, I hear background noise. I hear a kid laughing. I think, his kid's freaking pocket dialing me,
right?
You know, or got his phone and is dialing my number. So I got a hold of him and I said, look, man, I said, your kid's getting your phone and keeps dialing my number. So again, you know, I get this whole, oh man, yeah, she'll do that. I really apologize. You know, it's not going to happen again. Well, guess what? It does. But now the calls take a turn. I'll get up to leave my office and I'll come back and the phone is wrong. It'll go off at 3:30 in the morning, 4 a.m., you know, and I typically, I mean, now bear in mind too, I was working on Strange Intruders as this was going on. Okay. So it gets crazier because, you know, I mean, I kind of keep writer's hours, you know, whenever I can write, I write. So, you know, there are times I'll stay up the entire night and write. And as soon as I would go to bed, you know, be 6 a.m., I'd get up later and see mislog 6 a.m., you know, from his number. So I'm sitting in the office one day and the phone rings from him. I ignore it right at this point. And then I get a message pop up from him on the computer. And he's like, hey, man, he's like, dude, it's really me. I got to talk to you. So I'm like, what the heck's going on? He is flipping out. Now this guy's a paranormal investigator, okay, and you know, involved in all kinds of crazy stuff too. He gets me. He says, "You won't effing believe this." He said, "I'm laying on my bed, reading your book, Black-Eyed Children. My phone is on the bed, in the middle of the bed, next to me. No one is touching it. Out of my peripheral vision, I see my phone light up. I look over at it. It's dialing your number." Shit. So now he's really flipping out. He says, dude, I'm taking this to the cell phone people tomorrow, first thing. Goes to the cell phone place the next day. Tells them what's going on. They're looking, you know, there's all these logs, call after call to me, right? No other number, no other anomalies with the phone. The techs look it over. They keep it for a while. They bring it back out to him. They say, there's nothing wrong with your phone. We can't explain why it's doing this. So he lets me know all of this. The calls continue. And then one day, now this part I kind of found out in the aftermath, because one day my phone rings and it's him. And it was the last call. The reason being that he had his phone on the dash of his car. He was taking a road trip. Sitting on the dash of his car, he saw that phone light up and dial my number one final time, the moment he drove across the bridge into Point Pleasant, West Virginia.
Good Lord.
Come on.
Good Lord. So that would be a yes. Wow. They can manipulate cell phones. Wow. Thanks a lot,
David. That's
so, you know, God. And the thing was, I mean, it was such a, Keelian moment, if you will, for me, because in the aftermath, I sat there stunned, realizing, and he told me, he told me right away. He contacted me right afterwards. He's like, dude, you're not going to believe this. My phone just lit up and called you as soon as we drove under the Point Pleasant sign across the bridge. So, of course, I sat there. I mean, I heard all of this, and I literally just sat in my office. I was stunned, and I'm thinking, I had this feeling that something, and that's the term I use, something was saying to me, see, we can do whatever we want, whenever we want.
Yeah, man. And that's the thing. It felt so helpless. Like my wife, if I remember correctly, I think my father-in-law, who's deeply religious, got one of these messages. I'll have to ask my wife, but I do remember talking to my wife and her going like, geez, Matt, your phone got hacked or something, because they were leaving nasty messages, and I just felt like I can't do anything about this. They've gotten my phone. Yeah, and I had the phone shut off, of course, through AT&T, whoever it was, but that feeling of helplessness. And I had that feeling of like, I'm not in charge of this, like there's nothing I can do.
Yeah.
And it's a horrible feeling. It was really frightening. And boy, isn't that funny? You're so influenced by John Keel and the whole Mothman thing. And then that happens there. Unbelievable. What a story.
Yeah, it was unreal. It's, even to this day, it's one of those things I just think, oh my gosh, you can't.
The author is David Weatherly. The book Strange Intruders, of course, also Woodknocks. Ronnie, you have another question?
Yeah, I had one question for you, David.
I'm done.
Matty might quit the podcast after
God,
this.
Seriously.
David, a lot of people don't know that. I mean, you have an unbelievable, extensive background, but you're also a shaman, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Which I find, I feel like I've been on this path now for the past couple of years where I'm trying to learn more about it. And I went up to Maine a couple of years ago to Audrey and Debbie Starborn's event, two twin sisters that have had abduction experiences. And they had an event up in Maine, and Richard Dolan was emceeing. Kawani Laswaritis was actually there, who's also a shaman and has done a lot of research within the Sasquatch and Bigfoot, fields. But so I met him, gave him a book, my book, and maybe like a day later, when I was outside, I had this praying mantis land on me, and it looked like, I'll send you a picture of it. It looks like an alien with black
looks
eyes,
like gray,
brown, and it it landed on me, and for me, the only person that would be like, okay, I'm going to look at the spiritual significance of the praying mantis as like a spirit animal, because I was in that kind of realm, like focusing on that. But
sure,
what is your interpretation of that? Because I've been trying to get some answers on it, and there's been some cool things around it, and at the same time, a little intimidating to me, I guess. But
intimidating. You talking about the mantis specifically, or are you talking about the?
I just think the coincidence, because I did talk to Audrey Starborn after that, and she's like, "Oh, that's crazy." She's like, "Last year, they were all over the place, flying all over," and there's a significance that I guess certain cultures deem praying mantis almost like a manifestation of God, and this whole ride's been very spiritual for me, but I just would love to get your interpretation of that. I know everything is for that specific person, but there's times where I think someone with your background would be able to kind of enlighten me a little bit on that, if there is anything at all.
Well, so I mean, the praying mantis in general, if it's that kind of experience that you're describing, it's often how a totem animal or spirit animal will manifest to you and make itself known and sort of begin to create that connection with you. And every animal, of course, has its own unique qualities and things that it brings when it forges that connection. So the mantis in general, it's interesting, some of the terminology used, because the praying mantis, it represents very calculated and considered movements. The mantis is known as being very elegant, and for calculating its movements out ahead of time. It's an animal of awareness and mindfulness.
Right.
It's no coincidence that Buddhism, talks about the mantis being very Buddha-like because it is slow and aware and very patient. And it's also, one of its traits is creativity, but it also does have to do with connecting to the divine. It's sort of this, it's seen as being graceful beauty in terms of, being able to see beauty in everything, and hence connecting with God through that.
And David, what does it mean, again, thinking about our listeners who might not be versed in this stuff as we are, what does it mean in 2018 to be a shaman?
Great question.
Man, that's a good question. And I think that for everyone, really, it's sort of individual. For me, it's been a very individual path. It developed for me at a very young age because, what happened was I grew up in the rural area of North Carolina. And bear in mind, this was the 1970s. So the stuff I was interested in, no one else around me was. Yeah. And, I found myself very compelled by two things: the paranormal in general, just everything weird, and at the same time, I was very intrigued by magic, tribal traditions, magical paths, like shamanism. So I pursued the two things at the same time. To me, they were very interconnected and remain very interconnected to this day. And I think one has benefited the other for me personally, because in terms of the paranormal stuff, the supernatural world is really the world of the shaman. And you get into these tribal cultures all over the world. They view all of these things as simply a part of the universe, as simply a part of our experience here. So there's not that stigma that, oh, if you believe in ghosts, you're nuts. All those types of things. And as I said, the two paths unfolded at the same time for me, and really have always kind of been one. So for me, I just continue to do what I really love doing. And the shamanic aspect offers me a lot of things. It offers me a certain level of protection and understanding, a perspective I think that a lot of people don't have when it comes to various phenomena. And again, sort of that holistic view of the universe, not just the things that we can explain, but even more importantly, the things that we can't currently logically explain. And, it's a constantly evolving path. I don't think it's stagnant at all. It's funny because when, in terms of the paranormal stuff, when I always joke that when I started doing this stuff, if I went to a party and told people what I did, I was guaranteed a nice, quiet evening alone. Because, everybody said, that guy's asking about ghosts and big feet, and, just stay the heck away from him, and now if I go to a party and people find out what I do, it's, there's a queue out the door because everybody has a question.
We were just talking about that, how fast it's changed.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And I think it's cool because, from a shamanic perspective, what I see is a lot more people unknowingly opening up their consciousness and awareness on a different level. And I think that's something that on a planetary scale, we definitely desperately need.
Yes.
I don't think so. I think things are going just fine as they are.
Thank you, Trump.
You're welcome. You got one more, Ronnie?
No,
all right. So, David, we could ask you questions all night, but you've given us more time than we expected anyway. So thank you so much. Again, the book is Strange Intruders. And then the book Wood Knocks. How old is Wood Knocks, David? Is that the new one?
Well, let's see. Gosh, I've got so many books out. So Wood Knocks Volume 3 just came out.
Okay, that's what. So I have two here.
Last month. Okay. Yeah. So there's 3 volumes. The new volume has, the cover is a Sasquatch in the desert, because I wrote about encounters in Arizona in that volume. So there's 3 volumes of Wood Knocks, really a collection of pieces from incredible cryptozoologists all over the world at this point have contributed to it. And I'm very happy with some of the contributions to that, all the contributions to it. So yeah, the 3 volumes of Wood Knocks, Strange Intruders, Black Eyed Children Revised Edition, which came out the end of last year. I've got got about 5 books coming out this year, guys.
Wow, come on.
Awesome. Keep them coming,
a lot more material. There's a number of DVD productions I worked on that have come out this year of investigations of haunted locations. So I stay on the move, and I travel and just love doing this stuff 24/7. So
and before I ask my final question, where can we find you? Where can people find you on social media and all that?
Yeah, I've got Facebook, of course. There's a blog at twocrowsparanormal.blogspot.com. Yes, the crow is my totem animal. That's not a clue. There's a YouTube channel under Society of the Supernatural with some of the haunted investigations. And of course, all the books are on at Amazon.com. And lots of other cool stuff coming from me this year too.
Excellent. We're going to get you out here still.
Yeah,
Dave.
we're right down. We are a few miles from Monsterland. We're on the outskirts of Monsterland here, where all this stuff has happened, from UFOs to Bigfoot and all that. And then we're only probably 20 minutes from the Bridgewater Triangle, maybe a half hour, Puckwudgies and all that. So we got to get you here, man. You'd have a field day.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I love Ronnie's books. I read that and I was like, okay, I gotta get out to this region and see.
Thanks, David.
Yeah, New England altogether is crazy. David, one last one from me, and this is kind of, I guess, just personal because. The three of us are believers, so I'm not going to do the whole, do you think there's anything to this or what, the connections between all these things. Like, I think Slender Man's a straight up demon that was put in that guy's head that already existed. The black-eyed children thing, my story, all these things, as you said, there seems to be a common thread somehow, or at least a lot of the experiences are common. So my question to you is, what can we do to protect ourselves?
Oh, geez. Okay. So, I tell everybody to find the spiritual path that you're personally comfortable with and draw from that. One of the flaws that really comes up in this field, especially in terms of people doing haunted locations, they go in somewhere and they find a problem and they say, oh, well, this house has demonic entities. You need to get a priest in here. We're going to bless it for you. What if the family's Jewish? What if they're Buddhist?
Right.
This is never considered. Another thing that's never considered is, okay, well, have you looked at the background? Have you considered, what's the origin of the native land here? What exactly are we dealing with?
Yeah.
A Catholic priest is going to be ineffective against, a Shawnee spirit that's pissed off about something. So, I think it's really important in those terms to look at the various angles. And on a personal level, I get asked that question all the time. I tell people, look, consider your own spirituality, whether you need to go back to the roots of what you were raised in, or whether you converted to something, or whether there's just something that you're comfortable with, and draw from that. And if you're not spiritual, then, consider looking at some basic things that are spiritual and just consider them a psychological defense. If it makes you feel better and more protected, by all means, pursue that. And, it's funny you asked this question because I have to throw something in here I didn't address earlier. You're telling the story about your encounter in the theater. And I have to point out that in most encounters with black-eyed children, a good portion of the encounters, the people who witness these things tend to not be practicing a spiritual path at the time, but shortly after the encounter, they become more spiritual. They retreat back to their Catholic upbringing or their Jewish roots or whatever it is. And time again, I've been told, I just wanted something that was spiritual comfort that I felt like would give me more protection. So, and your story is kind of a little bit of a different take on that, but it's fascinating to me that you were just delving back into your spiritual beliefs and had this encounter.
Yeah, so, I felt like I was getting. I felt like they were trying to stop it, or just let me know they were there, or just mess me up. It felt tricksterish. It felt bad. It felt evil. And one of the guys, I was in touch at that time with a priest, actually a very famous priest in the Catholic Church, who did a lot of work in this area, including investigating claims of miracles and exorcisms and things like that, who happened to be in New York State in Westchester. And I was in contact with him, and his guy got a call, like a nasty one, So I thought of the 400 names or whatever on my phone, like
Right.
those people got the calls. I mean, I can't equate it to anything else but something malevolent.
But it's
Of
interesting
course.
though how it kind of sent you in that
It sent
positive
me-
direction.
Oh,
right?
I was like I said, I was reconverting. It was all nice and beautiful, but I maybe had still 1 foot in the toe
Yeah.
of kind of like, yeah, this is nice. I dove in after that experience. So if their goal was to keep me from it, it had the opposite effect, actually. You know,
So obviously, for you, something like a Saint Michael or a
Yep.
Saint Benedict is excellent protector.
Yep. I wear something around my neck every day.
So yeah, there you go.
David, this has been
Yeah.
just awesome, man. And like I said, we want to get you here and we want to have you back on the show. So
Yeah,
we can't
great.
thank you enough.
Thank you, David.
Hey, anytime, guys. I had a great time talking with you. So yeah, just let me know.
Awesome.
Thank you, David. That was freaking amazing.
Oh my God, that was great.
Fantastic.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. We'll talk soon.
All right, brother. I'll talk to you soon.
If you'll excuse me, I'm going to go destroy my cell phone. I'll be right back. Just going to throw my cell phone out. Wow. What an interview.
Unreal. I was getting chills when he was describing the black-eyed children and
Those things are, I think, out of anything. And what he didn't mention, too, in the book, you read the book, the cadence with which these kids... Now, here's another tie-in to Men in Black. People report that Men in Black are almost speaking like they don't quite know English.
Right.
And
Yeah.
these black-eyed children do
Very
the same
similar, yep.
thing. They'll say things like, one of the cases in the book, I believe, the guy, they come to his door and they say, it is eating time now. Or something to that effect. It is food time now. Which is freaking horrifying. Like they're kind of like pretending to be human or something. So there's so much to these things.
Yeah.
But yeah, great interview. David Weatherly, check out his books.
So good.
Such a good writer and such a good guy.
Yeah.
Great energy to his voice. I want to have him back.
Absolutely.
Once again, we are powered by many people who make this possible. Of course, Pod 617. Of course, the unstoppable tour de force that is Ian Barrett, media boss, where we
brother.
are filming this thing right now. And the team at Squatchachusetts, the local chapter of the BFRO here. Ronnie, where can people find Squatchachusetts who happen to be in this area of New England and might have a sighting or want to have a sighting?
Right, yeah. So Squatchachusetts, you can find them on Facebook. They have a closed group that you can ask to join. But it's a great way to connect with other people in Massachusetts and the surrounding New England area. They'll get in contact with other people, investigators. If you had an encounter or a sighting, they'll help you out to, is this something that's real or is this something else? So they're great guys.
Thank you, Team Squatchachusetts. And how about a little mail? So, Ronnie, I noticed a conspicuous lack of a Monsterland case file today, which actually I'm glad about because I want to take a break after the Fort Devens file we opened.
Yeah, and you want to sleep tonight, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you have mail, though.
I do. This is really very cool because we're actually going to see how a case file kind of comes to be, because I got a direct message a couple of days ago before we started filming here from a friend who's going to remain anonymous.
Okay.
He had a sighting recently, and it's been ongoing. This also involved a police officer.
Okay, hold on. Can I just stop you for a second?
Yes.
So this is basically, our Monster Mail is basically a brand new case file, a brand new
Correct.
Monsterland case file, which you will,
Right.
it doesn't even have a number.
Doesn't have a number yet. Like, it's
Holy
coming
snake.
in.
All right,
and
this is cool.
I've known this guy for a long time.
All right.
Very credible.
Can we give him a fake name so we can just refer to him as something?
Let's call him Tom.
Tom. Okay.
So the other thing is he's a little nervous, but he kind of told me this story, and I connect with him on the phone and also in person. And he had a sighting that he actually called, and I'm not gonna. It's not necessarily in Leominster, but it's next to Leominster, very close.
Very close to Monsterland.
Because I don't want to mention the police
town.
department.
Got it. Okay. So
just as it's still
Got it.
early, but I do want to say it's within the vicinity because it's within Monsterland itself in that area, but it's just an unreal story. So, anyways, he's been going out at night in his backyard, and he has an unbelievable view, and he's noticed these what he described to me as drone-looking vehicles that are the shape of diamonds, and they are flying. He sees a pair of them almost like following each other and almost doing maneuvers. So he's been watching them, and he's called the police a few times. Well, finally, one of the times he called and he was having this sighting, a police officer showed up at his house. They're in the backyard, and Tom tells him, these things keep on buzzing over my house. They're flying over. He says this too. He goes, and when they do fly over, like if they're on the phone or something, they'll hear like this weird, like they'll be talking and all of a sudden something will fly over and they'll hear like weird kind of like signals coming.
Interference?
Yes. And he just thinks it's, it's a plane or something. But
now, Ian, stop you again. Ian, our director, you use drones sometimes in your shots with your cameras and stuff. And I know Prometheus, could a drone cause that type of interference? Probably not, right?
So this is, he has a police officer come over. They're in the backyard, and Tom tells him, listen, this thing buzzes over my house one more time. I'm going to shoot it out of the sky,
He has a weapon.
He has guns.
Yeah.
And the police officer, you can't do that. He's like, why not? He feels like it's spying on the house, like it's coming near the windows and things like that. As they're talking about this, a diamond-shaped craft, which is the size of maybe like a door almost, or a little bit smaller than a door, flies over them. The police officer pulls out his flashlight, has it on the craft as they're watching it together, and it flies over his roof. And he's like, see, there it is. And then they both looked at each other as this thing passed over, and they realized that it was silent. It didn't make a sound. So when he told me that about a drone, I was like, you're going to hear sound, especially something that big.
They were actually pretty loud. I know because, again, on Oak Island, I'm not just doing this to plug my own show. When I do drilling down, we use a lot of drone shots. And when it comes down, we have to separate the audio because it goes... Those things make a pretty loud noise on those really powerful drones.
So dead silent. Here's the other weird connection here, too, is I'm friends with his sister as well. Okay. Who has also had a sighting. So this is actually spawning into another kind of Monsterland file because she had and there could be even deeper to this too, but she had a sighting in Leominster. This goes back to 2008, and she was in a building that was all kind of glass windows around. They're up on the second floor. She was with her boss. Beautiful day out, no clouds in the sky, and they saw what she described to me as a black box, like a rectangle, no wings, just a box flying in the sky. And she says to her boss, do you see that? She's like, yeah, that black box looking thing.
What the?
And this thing is just flying across very slowly. And she goes, you know what? She's like, I don't even remember how that ended. Like we were talking about it. And then it was almost like we kind of lost interest.
Almost lost time?
Something.
Or just...
So here's the thing that really creeped me out. As she's telling me the story, and her brother Tom is with her, and he goes, hey, you remember that time when we were like 5 or 6 and we had that hot air balloon land in the backyard?
Yeah. Okay.
And I said, guys.
That wasn't a hot air balloon.
I said, guys, I'm sorry. There was no hot air balloon that landed in your backyard. That was a frickin' UFO or something. That's like a screen memory.
Let's test them for metal in their body.
I'm telling you.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think there's a lifelong set of experiences with both of them that they're not aware of until now.
This is almost a textbook case of that type of stuff. And again, for those of you who don't know, my friend Uncle Buck, who listens to the show, goes, you keep mentioning these things, and I don't know what you're talking about. I have to remember that people don't know this stuff. The joke I make about what Ronnie describes often does happen with families, and then they have repressed memories, and then it turns out under hypnosis or something they were completely abducted and all this stuff. And I made a joke about metal in their body because there's been a phenomenon of alien implants, metal in abductees' bodies that has actually been tested.
Yep, Dr. Roger Lear,
who unfortunately passed.
Right.
But and this metal is coming up as anomalous. They can't exactly determine what it is and how it got in these people's bodies, and it seems to be connected to them, like on their
yeah. It actually would connect to the nervous system.
The nervous
system
system
uses the body's energy to, like a battery, to power it.
Okay, so let's back up. Can we? All right, I have about 50 questions, but we got to go because we're late. That's a podcast. No, screw it. We make the rules. I've got the radio clock.
See, yeah.
Okay. Eventually, Did the police officer make a report on this? He has
We're trying to find out.
Because isn't there some sort of freedom of information in a town?
You know what? Yes, but yes, and I think that in this situation, he would probably. So we're looking into that now.
Okay.
We're trying to get in touch with the police officer.
Okay.
To get him to tell his story as well.
We are so gonna get shot.
So I'm working on this.
Okay.
So if I disappear,
right. Okay, but so that's my first question: is eventually, if there's a report, we would be able to get access to
right.
it.
And it might say a drone or something along those lines, but we can then say, look, the police officer was there at the property at this time. Yep.
So we're looking into that, and understand this is sensitive because people's careers are on the line, and reputations. That being said, can we go to his house and look at this thing and not necessarily do the podcast?
He has invited us.
All right, let's do that.
Come to his property.
Let's go look at it.
Stay over, do whatever we want.
Let's do that. Why don't we do a little investigation? We'll report back here with his permission, of course.
Sounds great.
And then eventually maybe we'll get to the point where after we browbeat him, he'll come on the podcast and just totally admit who he is.
No. He says
when he hears me talk about black-eyed children at X's
he's
Emily
gonna
Rose,
run. He's gonna run away.
I'll be like, well, if this jerk admits that, I can admit I saw something fly over my house.
But what's amazing is that this is ongoing.
I love that. I love that you did that because I like looking in the past at Monsterland, which we will continue to do from time to time, and as those cases relate to international cases that we look at. But I love that this is going on now to show you that Monsterland is still very much active.
Yeah, and you know what? The hope is that there's others that are listening to this that are in this area of Central Mass, even just within Massachusetts. Have you had a sighting of this type of diamond-shaped craft? We would love to hear from you because I know there's others that have seen this.
Or anywhere. And yes, local, so we can get to it, but anywhere around the world, if you're listening to this, we want to hear your stories, and you can do that at
Monsterland Podcast on Facebook. And if you're looking on Twitter, Instagram, it's at Monsterland Pod.
And our email?
monsterlandreport@gmail.com.
monsterlandreport@gmail.com. We want your emails. And in fact, we got a good one, speaking of non-local. This is from Linda S., and she's from Nova Scotia. She listened to our interview with Joe Lessard, The Curse of Oak Island.
Excellent.
She lives right near Shag Harbour.
The famous...
The Shag Harbour incident. And she says she has a cousin that was involved, she believes, with aliens and possible abduction.
Wow.
And that there's a man named Al who is an elderly man, but he is, he is an elderly, and he is looking into why they are here and what do they want to tell us. We met recently, we saw recently he placed an ad in a local paper in Nova Scotia looking for experiences. And he's looking to bring people together who either had to do with that incident or have had their own experiences in that area and come together and share and all that. So we'll keep our eye on that.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about the Shag Harbour incident.
Well, what I do know about it, I believe it was like 1954, but there was a UFO very similar to what we talked about with the Tic Tac UFO, where they had a UFO which they think was under the water. This was the Navy, I believe it was the Canadian Navy and the American Navy as well that witnessed this craft under the water that seemed to be damaged. And there was another UFO craft that was down there in the water actually helping fixing it. And they were watching this, I think, over a course of, 3 days or something along those lines.
Yeah, it's an incredible sight. If we don't have time to get into it now, but look up Shag Harbour UFO incident if you don't know about it. Also, pre-incident, I forgot about this, pre-incident aerial phenomenon that a flight, let me see if we can find the flight, Air Canada Flight 305, listen to this. Air Canada Captain Pierre Chabonon, Flight 305, pointed out to co-pilot Bob. Talk about the short end of the stick, right?
Yeah.
Main pilot, Captain Pierre Chabonon. Co-pilot, Bob Ralph. Poor Bob Ralph. There was something strange out the left side of the aircraft at 7:15 p.m. In his report, the captain reports an object tracking along on a parallel course a few miles away, brilliantly lit, rectangular object with smaller lights trailing the larger object.
Smaller lights. So it sounds like orbs trailing.
At 7:19, the pilots noticed a silent explosion near the large object. 2 minutes later, a second explosion occurred, which faded to a blue cloud around that object. And
sounds
then
like a portal opening. What the hell's going on?
Yeah, or maybe that craft went down somehow, and there was or maybe it was a USO, and that's how they. Anyway, so thank you for that email, and we will stay in touch up there with Nova Scotia and see what they come up with. What a show, man!
Wow, holy
what
cow!
A show.
I mean, just I feel like you've gotten some. I don't know if I would say closure, but I feel like you're getting a little bit more insight on your personal experience. But it seems to be even more freakier now.
Definitely. Well, you know what's happening? I'm like a reluctant experiencer in a way, and all these things are coming at me fast and furious now, and I'm able to. And it's so funny to be comforted at the same time you're terrified. Like, I'm comforted in the fact that David, this story I told him was like. Yeah, which example do you want of things that are exactly like it? Which terrifies me.
Yeah. Because it just says that this is real.
It validates that it was real. It because you do that game with yourself. You go, I just made it up because I was at a scary movie, or I'm remembering it wrong, or I'm exaggerating in my own mind. But no, when I'm alone and I think about that, I know. And I left out a part, actually.
What?
When I got to the subway and my phone was gone. Now, again, this could be coincidence. I've told you this.
That
across
guy
the platform,
that was like staring at you.
Yes.
And you felt this evil sensation.
Yeah. So he was I didn't feel it. He was looking at me like this. So and you do see homeless people all the time. So but basically, people listening don't know what I'm talking about. But I did leave something out of that story that when I was feeling this horrible feeling of like, where's my phone and who were the, and then I started and I was spooked up by the movie, of course.
Yeah.
And I'm in the subway. I'm all alone, which is rare in the middle of the day, but I'm all alone. And going the other way, I was going back into Midtown, going the other way. I think I was getting on the 6. I was going on the 6 to Grand Central. On the other side of the platform, there was this like homeless guy, dirty, and he's just, I didn't notice it at first, and he's staring at me like a movie scene. Like trains are going by the middle tracks. Oh. And he's just staring at me like this.
Gaze not broken.
Nasty look on his face. And just like, why is this guy? And I'm looking at my phone. And I just had the feeling of dread, And I'm just like, get me out of here. What is going on? What is going on? And I got on that train and I took off and that was it. But
what a crazy experience.
I had to mention that because that was part of the experience for me. When I think back on it, I always think of his face. And we didn't talk to David about the smiling man, the grinning man.
Right.
Which we will.
Well, we'll have him back.
He
was great.
Which is close to what I saw. He wasn't grinning, but it was that maniacal.
Yeah.
All right, let's end it.
Man.
Until next time, thank you all. Thank you, Ronnie LeBlanc.
Thank you, Matty Blake.
Thank you, Pod617. Thank you, Media Boss. Thank you, Ian.
Ian, love you.
Thank you, Squatchachusetts. We will see you next time. And remember, Monsterland's not just a place, it's a space up in here and in here.